Good morning, everyone. This is John with Gun Deals, and today we're going to be talking about the Geissele 16-inch Super Duty upper receiver. This one here is in FTE, and it comes with their Surefire close-time flash hider out at the end. Now, before I get into that, if you don't know, Gun Deals is basically a website that provides you with links to some of the best prices and products within the industry. Whatever it is that you're looking for, they probably have a link for it on their website for the best possible price. Now, they don't take your money, they don't buy or sell anything. They merely point you in the right direction. So if you like buying cool stuff at discounted prices, sometimes they even have their own discounted coupon codes, then go ahead and check them out. Now, other than that, you can also like, share, and subscribe because all that sort of stuff is free, and go ahead and comment your favorite crayon color in the description down below. Now, let's go ahead and get into some of the basics. The most basic thing is that I don't have any relationship with Geissele whatsoever. I did pay my own money for this upper receiver. They don't know who I am, and it will probably stay that way for the foreseeable future. So now let's go ahead and talk about some of the basic specs and features of the upper receiver, and if at the end of the day we think that this is worth the money that it costs. Usually these are somewhere between $1,300 and $1,500, usually, though they can go down in price. I've seen them as low as $1,200 in certain places, and I actually paid distributor pricing for this, in full disclosure, so I paid even less than that for this upper receiver. But let's go ahead and get into some of the very basic specifications. So the barrel is basically half of the heart and soul of any upper receiver, especially an AR-15 upper receiver, because it will dictate all of your accuracy and how well the system runs via the gas port. So this is a 16-inch 4150 cold hammer forged chrome lined barrel. Now that is just about everything that you could possibly want in a duty grade hard use barrel. 4150 chrome moly steel is the toughest barrel steel that they make currently. On top of that, the barrel steel that Geissele uses is extremely high quality. Cold hammer forge is an excellent process, just adds some extra durability into the steel as it's getting worked. And on top of that, chrome lining is an incredibly hard surface finish. So the barrel steel that most people use gets finished to around 28 to 32 Rockwell C. Chrome is about 50 to 55 on the Rockwell C scale. So it's very hard, very tough. And the chrome lining of the chamber and the bore means that you are going to have a barrel that is going to last a very long time. Now, on top of chrome being very hard, it's also extremely lubricious, and it's extremely heat resistant, and it's extremely corrosion resistant. So if you were wanting to put 50,000 rounds through a barrel, this would be a very good candidate for that sort of thing. You have the highest quality barrel steel and the highest quality finishing processes and coatings that you can get. Now, that's on the inside and the chamber, which this is of course a 5.56 chamber. On top of that, this is a 1-in-7 twist, so this will stabilize basically anything you can fit in a 5.56 magazine. The finishing on the outside, I believe they call it like their DLC coating, but it's basically just a very nice black nitride coating on the exterior, which is again a very nice, very good heat resistant, very tough finish. Normally the exterior of the barrel isn't really taking any impacts because it's covered up by a rail, of course, which we'll get into later on as well. So the gas system length that they went with on their 16-inch upper receivers is not a mid-length, and it's not a rifle. I believe they call it the Geissele length system. So it's basically just in between a mid-length and a rifle. It's about an inch longer than a mid-length, and theoretically that will give you a little bit softer shooting impulse, a little bit softer recoil. In theory, the farther out you can push the gas block, the slower, softer recoil impulse you're going to have. The problem on this specific barrel is that it's overgassed, and we'll get into that later, but the barrel is overgassed, so having the little bit longer of a gas system length doesn't really matter all that much with this upper receiver. Now, the barrel profile is it's not a lightweight profile, but it is what I would call a middleweight profile. So it's not a government whatsoever because it doesn't have a fat section on the end. It's a single taper to the gas block. and then it tapers down a little bit in the last 4 inches of the barrel. So it's not a true lightweight profile, and it is kind of their own in-house profile, which is very nice. When you're buying a Geissele, a lot of the stuff is done in-house. It's all to their own design specifications, and you're going to pay for all of that as well. It's definitely a good balance between weight and accuracy. Profile does matter when it comes to accuracy, because it does greatly affect your barrel harmonics, which are going to affect how it shoots round to round to round. And as we'll get into later, the barrel is also extremely accurate. Now, on top of that, at the end here, we have a Surefire close tine. I'll lower it down a little bit so you guys can actually see that. We have a Surefire close tine flash hider, which is a really good muzzle device if you want to attach a Surefire can. However, if you don't want to attach a Surefire can, it is basically a $150 A2 flash hider. It does everything that an A2 flash hider does. It feels exactly the same. It might do a little bit better flash reduction just because it is a little bit longer of a flash hider. But overall, if you're not going to be buying a Surefire can, I don't recommend any of Surefire's muzzle devices, as they are incredibly expensive for the money. However, if you're going to buy a Surefire can, because they do make some of the best cans, most durable duty grade cans on the market, then again, this is a great muzzle device because it allows you to attach that Surefire can. And on top of that, they don't use crush washers. They use actual shims to perfectly align your muzzle device. On top of that, the Surefire, it is pre-tapped for pin and weld. But again, this is a 16-inch upper receiver, so it's no pin and weld on this one. On top of that, they also use rock set to really make sure that that muzzle device never moves. So this is really set up for suppressor use. However, again, if you don't plan on going with a Surefire muzzle device, I would actually get the stripped upper receiver that just has the upper receiver and the barrel and all that sort of stuff without the muzzle device, because you can get a lot better muzzle device for less money. So now let's go ahead and talk about the gas block itself, because this is another item that they're very proud of. They developed in-house, and it does work extremely well. It's a very, very good design. The gas blocks themselves, if you were to buy them just by themselves, are like 70 to 80 bucks for a non-adjustable gas block. So it's pretty expensive. They're pretty proud of it. But it uses a double set screw style design, which is very good. And on top of that, it is also pinned in place with their bomb-proof installation, is what they call it. And they are correct about it. This gas block will never move. There is no impact that this can't take that you can. So for all intents and purposes, this is a indestructible style mounting system for their gas block. On top of that, they go into great detail about how the collar is set up to perfectly match up with the barrel so that there's no gas leakage whatsoever, so that they can, fine tune the amount of gas coming back into the system. Though again, as we'll talk about it, it is overgassed. So it's kind of a moot point there, but the installation and the quality of the gas block is exceptional. And because they are using their own gas system length, it does have a custom length gas tube as well. So if you were trying to switch stuff out on it, it can be a little bit more problematic, because you got to go through Geissele for a lot of that sort of stuff, because nobody else makes it. Now, moving back to the second part of the heart and soul of any upper receiver, and that is going to be the bolt carrier group. And now this is their reliability enhanced bolt carrier group. There are some really cool things going on about it, and I'm going to be honest, I was fairly skeptical about some of their claims on the bolt carrier group, because I've seen a lot of people say that their bolt carrier group's coatings are so much better, and then they wear out pretty soon, like 500 to 1,000 rounds. At this point on this bolt, we are at about 1,500-ish rounds on everything that you see on the upper receiver. Mostly really crappy steel-cased ammunition. On top of that, some really high-quality match, because we did take this upper receiver out to 500 yards, as well as some accuracy testing as well. Now, the bolt is one of the highlights of the bolt carrier group. So the bolt is what they call their Carpenter 158 Plus material. So it's basically mil spec, but they claim through their specific metallurgy processes that the bolt goes through, they claim that it has up to 4 to 5 times the life of a standard bolt. Most bolts are rated at somewhere between 5 and 10,000 rounds. This one here, they claim, I think, 25 to 30,000 rounds. So if you're looking for a ultimate longevity for a bolt, they claim anyways that it's going to live up to those expectations. Again, I don't have 30,000 rounds to put through it to test that claim, but other people have, and I have not heard of any failures of these bolts whatsoever. On top of that, The bolt lugs themselves are very nicely chamfered for a very smooth lock and unlock. The finish over the entire bolt is their DLC coating, which again they say has been developed in-house to be the hardest surface finish, the most lubricious, the longest lasting, all of that sort of stuff. To my naked eye, it looks like a very simple black nitride. All the machining work done on it is quite well. Now on top of that, on the gas key itself, it does have proper staking. The staking looks very good, and it is using true grade 8 fasteners. Now over the 1500 rounds that I've put on this bolt carrier, normally you're going to be seeing pretty aggressive wear on the upper and lower rails. You'll see the finish start to come off. But on this upper receiver, which I have not, or this bolt carrier, which I have not cleaned whatsoever, so it's very gross, the finish still looks basically brand new, and that's after about 1500 rounds or 1000 to 1500 rounds of very, very hard use, firing it very, very quickly, very, very crappy ammunition. And I'm not really seeing any wear and tear on the bolt carrier itself, which normally on most budget upper receivers or budget bolts, you would be seeing very aggressive wear on the rails and that sort of thing. Lots of shiny bare material because that nitride or that phosphate coating has been removed after the first 500 to 1000 rounds. But on this bolt, after this many rounds without cleaning, and it looks basically brand new, which is very, very nice. So there is some truth to the fact that their coatings are doing a very, very good job. Now, another thing on their bolts that they're very proud of is that they have a little bit longer rail sections. Now, they claim that's like 50% more bolt stability, you know, for, again, enhanced reliability, better feeding, that sort of thing. The more stable of a bolt you can have, the more reliable it can be just to do the same thing over and over and over and over again, which is, of course, what you want. But other than that, the bolt is a fairly standard profile, and to the naked eye, doesn't look much different than any other bolt on the market. However, again, they are just using incredibly high quality material, so the base materials are very, very good. On top of very high quality coatings, the coatings are doing an excellent job of holding up, and very good machining, very good finishing work. Now, is the bolt worth $300 or $400 like they sell them for on their own? Well, for the pinnacle of reliability, I would say, you know, probably if you're just looking for what's the best mil spec style bolt that I can get, this is probably very near the top of that stack. So again, if price doesn't matter to you and you're just looking at true longevity and performance, and if their claims about the bolt are in fact true, which at this point I do assume that they are because these uppers have been out for quite some time, and they are very well regarded by a lot of people. So I would say that these are worth it if you're looking for the just pinnacle of reliability and function. So as far as the heart and soul of the upper receiver, you're getting some of the best materials, the best processes, the best coatings on the market. And for some people, that alone is going to be worth the price tag. But we're not quite done yet. So let's go ahead and talk about the rail, because this is another thing that people absolutely love, the Geissele rails. And in terms of Gucci rails, they're not actually the most expensive things on the market. Now, I still think that they're expensive and they're not going to be for the value or the more budget style of guys, but the rails are very, very good. So what we have here is a 6061 15 inch rail. This is, of course, 6061 T6 aluminum in this very nice FDE. I'm not sure if it's Duracoat or Cerakote, but it does look very, very good. We do have true 7-sided M-lock, as well as we have QD sling points on either side that are locked in place, so they have like a 30-degree rotation on them, so it's not much rotation. They are a bit odd in their placement because they are very close to the rail, so no matter how you put in your QD, the QD always knocks up against the rail, so I'm not sure why they put them here instead of like necessarily on the side a little bit lower where that wouldn't affect. However, I have still been using them. They're incredibly strong. There's a lot of material here holding them in place, and the rail in general is not a lightweight rail. It is a fairly heavy rail. The material on it is very, very thick, so even though it is a slimmer rail, it's not the slimmest rail on the market. Even though it is a slimmer rail, there is a lot of material here, which is a good thing because these rails are incredibly strong. So that is something about rails. If you want a thin, lightweight rail, you're going to be sacrificing strength. You just are. When you make aluminum this long, you're going to need to add more material to keep that rigidity, to keep that strength. So when you're buying an expensive upper receiver like this upper, and you're wanting to put a couple $1,000s worth of laser aiming modules on the front, you're going to want that rail to hold zero, and this is one of those rails that is absolutely going to do that. Now, coming back to the mounting mechanism, we have a very, very, very strong mounting mechanism. We have two of the largest cross bolts that I've seen on any style of rail. They're very, very large. I think they go down to like 65 or 70 inch-pounds of torque, which is again very, very strong. And you have a large steel locking block on this side that is connected. So instead of being separated and only applying pressure in 2 points, it is actually connected, so it applies pressure along a much larger surface area, which again, if you can apply more pressure over a larger surface area, you get a better lockup. Pretty simple. Now, visually, there's no anti-rotation tabs on it, and you can't really see it right now, but I'll take the optic off for you and show you guys some B-roll of it. But there is a monstrous anti-rotation tab machined into the handguard and the upper receiver. So the handguard actually locks into the upper receiver itself. And again, in some of the most bomb-proof fashion that I've ever seen, there is almost no conceivable way that you could get enough torque on the handguard and on the upper receiver to be able to shear that chunk of aluminum off. So again, in terms of lockup, in terms of strength and durability, the rail does an exceptionally good job of providing a stable mounting platform for your very expensive accessories that you probably are going to be mounting to a more Gucci style of handguard. And on top of that, these handguards can be found sometimes for only a couple $100. Compare that to some of Daniel Defense's offerings where the Risk 2 goes for like $400+ sometimes. So, or the CAC stuff as well goes for an incredible amount of money. So in terms of like Gucci rails, while this is not cheap, it is kind of on the lower end of price for some of the more Gucci rails, which is, and it does everything exceptionally well, except for being very light. It's not a lightweight rail whatsoever. But it is a very, very strong rail. And so for me personally, especially if I have very expensive stuff on the end of my rail that I want to maintain zero on, I am very, very happy trading a few ounces for that extra rigidity and that extra security, longevity, that sort of thing on the rail. Now, moving back to the upper receiver, there is basically nothing special whatsoever. We have M4 feed ramps machined in place. I believe this is an Anderson upper receiver. It has the square roll mark. I'm not sure who makes the actual upper receiver. I don't know if it's an Anderson upper, but it's just a very basic 7075 T6 aluminum upper receiver, finished in a slightly different shade of FDE. You kind of do get the 50 shades of FDE going on with these upper receivers, which is totally cool. Different materials, different amounts of materials are going to show up a little bit different in the color spectrum. And it looks really good in my opinion. But you have your standard forward assist, you have your standard dust cover, nothing special. You have a little G in the back to show you that the machining work was done by Geissele, because they do have to machine out the upper receiver as well so that that huge anti-rotation tab fits in place when the rail gets locked in place. But on top of that, the upper receiver is very, very standard. Now, something that I do want to say is that I would shoot this upper receiver quite a bit suppressed, but because of the rock set and because of the Surefire muzzle device that's on there, I haven't actually taken off the muzzle device to put on one of my Yankee Hill Machine flash hiders that's also a QD mount for my 4-1 suppressor, so I haven't really shot this suppressed whatsoever. So this charging handle is kind of a miss for me. Now, this charging handle is the Geissele Automatics, the airborne charging handle, and it has the big hump here in the rear to kind of mitigate some of the gas coming back. Now, in a 16-inch mid-length plus system, there shouldn't be too much gas blowback, even on a direct impingement gun, because you do have a good barrel length, a good gas system length, and it is a little over gas, but we'll talk about that in just a minute when we talk about how it's shot and accuracy. But the charging handle overall is okay. I definitely wouldn't charge $100 for it. I definitely wouldn't pay $100 for it, I should say. It's much worse than the Radian, and the reason for that is very simple. So if you look at these tabs here, they're pretty flat at a flat angle. Now, to unlock it, you actually have to pull them back at a negative angle, whereas the Radians start at a positive angle or a high angle of attack, whatever you want to call it, and then they end in a neutral or a flat position. So you still have very, very good leverage on the charging handle. However, with these, because they bend backwards, you actually tend to get less leverage on them than like a standard mil-spec charging handle. And I'm not sure why they would do that. If they would just make these wings cant forward another, 10, 15 degrees forward, so that when you pull on them, they go to a neutral angle instead of like a downward sloping angle, so your fingers can almost slip off of them. Now it is nicely knurled and they have these little lips on them, but even still, the aggressive angle that you pull back on them on, I have had my fingers, especially in gloves, come off of this charging handle more than I have on the Radians and other charging handles. Now, if I was shooting this a ton suppressed, because it has that built-in ridge in the back, it should help out a little bit in terms of getting gassed out. But overall, for $100 or $200, whatever they charge for this charging handle, which is quite a bit of money, I don't personally think it's worth it. I would probably just go with a mil-spec charging handle or a Radian if I wanted to go with something a little bit nicer.
Chest rigs are stupid.
Yeah. So the first time that I took out this upper receiver to go shooting with it, naturally I was very excited, as you should be. After you spend $1,000 on an upper receiver and you get it in, you should want to go take it out and shoot it basically as soon as you can. So when I took it out to shoot it for the first time, I was using it on this lower receiver. This is actually a BCA lower receiver. It's a very cheap lower receiver, but has some nice components on it, a very, very good 2-stage trigger and some other stuff. I was using a carbine buffer, carbine spring, and I was shooting it with just some really basic steel case ammunition, which is a lot of what I shoot is the cheapest steel case ammunition I can find so that I can shoot a lot more. But when I was shooting with it, it was very, very unpleasant with a carbine spring, carbine buffer. And for me, part of the downside was I was told by a lot of people that this was the best shooting upper receiver, the softest shooting upper receiver that they'd ever shot. It was super nice. It was so much better than everything else. And it was absolutely not better in terms of its shootability. Now, again, as I've gone over, everything on the upper receiver is incredibly high quality, but in terms of shootability, it was very, very poor. I've shot a lot of PSAs and cheaper upper receivers that have shot a lot softer than this upper receiver did out of the box with a carbine spring, carbine buffer. So I was pretty disappointed, but I didn't want to stop there. And now I am still not going to forgive them for that, because I don't think that you need to spend $1,000 to $1,500 on an upper receiver and then spend even more money on like a Voltor A5 or the recoil system that I'm going with in here, though we'll get into that in just a minute. I don't think that for $1,000 or $1,500 if you buy this retail price, I don't think that you should have to go out and get a different recoil assembly in the back or like an H3 buffer or something else to slow down the recoil impulse. I think it should just be gassed properly from the factory. And now on top of that, this is designed to be suppressed. It does come with a suppressor mount up front and a charging handle to block off some of the excess gases. So being overgassed from the factory, and then you throw on a back heavy suppressor can like the Surefire RC2s and stuff like that, you're going to get a very, very violent operating system. So overall, when I first shot it, the first like 5 or 6 magazines, I was kind of like, oh, that's okay. It's not great, and it doesn't really shoot that well. It might be super accurate, but if it's not pleasant to shoot, then I'm probably not going to shoot it all that much. So again, after about the first 5 or 6 magazines on the upper receiver, I was a little bit meh on the shooting impressions. It really didn't shoot that well. It was a little snappy, a little pushy, so I really didn't like the way it was feeling. And again, I was told it was going to be exceptional, and it was not. So I decided to go ahead and modify the buffer and recoil spring system in it. So I went to a H2 buffer from a carbine buffer, a 3 ounce, so a 4.9 to a 3 ounce buffer, or a 3 ounce to a 4.9 ounce buffer. And then I went to a Strike Industries flat wire recoil spring. I've had 40,000 rounds on those springs so far. I really, really like the way that they work, though again, they do have a kind of shorter lifespan. You're going to need to change them out every 5 to 10,000 rounds, but that was the system that I went with. And with that system, it was very, very soft. It felt nice. It felt good, not necessarily perfect, but it felt very, very good. Then I decided to even take it up a step further, and I put in this silent buffer assembly from Trinity Force. And I know Trinity Force is a budget brand that has a lot of budget products, but they came out with their new kind of Gen 2 silent buffer assembly. It is a H2 weight buffer, but it has a very, very kind of enhanced power spring in it. So it is a very, very tight spring. And with this system in it, there is very, very little recoil with the system, though again, I had to spend additional money on top of the cost of the upper receiver to make it shoot the way that I would think that it would shoot from the box. So there are a lot of upper receivers that I have that shoot softer with a carbine buffer and spring than with this, with a updated, more expensive recoil mitigation system. Now, it shoots very, very nice with this system. So right now, it's one of my favorite upper receivers to shoot, again, with this very, very strong silent buffer assembly from Trinity Force with an H2 buffer weight in it. But overall, I am still a little bit disappointed that the shooting impressions or the recoil impulse wasn't a little bit better from the factory. Now, all that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about accuracy. This was the upper receiver that I tested, the ZCO 5-27 that Gary loaned me. It's a $4,000 optic, so I decided to take it out on this because this was my nicest upper receiver that I have. And with this upper receiver, I took it out to 500 yards with some 69 grain ADI match grade ammunition with the Sierra Match King bullets in some high wind scenarios, and I was able to be a laser beam all the way out to 500 yards. Now, this upper receiver can definitely go a lot farther than that. If you pair it with some good ammunition, you're going to be able to go 600, 700, 800, 900, whatever the limits of your skill is going to be with a 5.56 and whatever you can stuff inside of a 5.56 magazine. This upper receiver will absolutely do it. Now, on top of that, I also did some paper testing with it. Now, the paper testing that you're going to see is, unfortunately, I don't have access to all the match loads that I would like. So let's go ahead and get into it. I did a 5-shot group with Wolf, and I got about 2.5 inches, 2.5 inches, something like that. I did a 5-shot group with some 69 grain PPU match ammunition, which is terrible ammunition, not very good whatsoever. It's grouped horrible in every gun that I've shot it through. Shot about 2 inches. Then the last group that I tested, the last ammunition was going to be 77 grain Seller and Bellet, the 77 grain match grade ammunition that they produce. And with that, I was able to get 5 shots basically touching for a sub MOA grouping. Now, if I had access to a lot of other high quality ammunitions, I have no doubt that this barrel would be able to produce back-to-back sub MOA groups with different loadings. However, I just didn't have access to all of them. But even with that being said, with the loads that I had access to, I was still able to produce sub-MOA groups with high-quality ammunition. And for me personally, anytime I see an AR-15 go down to about 1 MOA or less than 1 MOA, I am a very, very happy camper. So I can say with authority that the barrel, not only is it going to last you for an extremely long amount of time, but it's also going to be extremely accurate as well. Chrome lining for some people, depending on how it's done, can decrease accuracy just because it's another thing that you're adding on, a physical thing that you're adding on to the interior of your barrel. So if the chrome lining is not done perfect, if it's a little uneven, it can decrease your accuracy. However, in this specific barrel, with my testing, the accuracy is, again, absolutely phenomenal, and I would have no problem running this up against basically any other upper receiver on the market. So again, everything about this upper receiver is extremely high quality. You're going to be paying for it, but it is extremely high quality. The only knock that I have for this upper receiver, and this could be a one-off, but I would hope not, since, you know, it's a very, very expensive upper receiver for AR-15s, so I'd hope they'd all be virtually identical, but this is over-gassed. The gas port size is just a little bit too large. So I'd recommend running an H2 buffer plus a enhanced power spring, or even if you plan on running it solely suppressed, you might want to pick up an H3 buffer and again an enhanced power spring, but you're going to need to play around with it in your system with your ammunition to figure out what works best for you. Now, again, this is with this recoil system that I have in it right now, with this trigger, which is a MBS 2-stage trigger. It's a very, very, like a 2.5 pound first stage and like a 2 pound let off. It's a very, very good trigger. Overall, this is a exceptionally fun upper receiver to shoot. It's very, very accurate. It's very soft shooting. It's not particularly lightweight because, again, the barrel is a fairly lightweight contour, kind of a medium weight contour, but the rail is a fairly heavy, fairly long rail, and the bolt carrier isn't like a lightened bolt or anything else like that. So overall, I really, really like the upper receiver. I'm going to say it is worth it if you're looking for kind of the pinnacle of reliability and longevity in an upper receiver for an AR-15. But if you're looking for a race gun or something that's just the softest shooting AR-15 upper receiver, and maybe you're not looking for, you know, that super long longevity because you don't put as many rounds through your AR-15s as I do, then maybe this would probably not be worth it to you. And in fact, I would recommend getting something else that's a little bit better gas from the factory instead of having to go in and kind of modify some things within the system. So, overall, for its intended use case of kind of a duty grade pinnacle of AR-15 reliability and longevity, I think that Geissele did an exceptional job. In terms of shootability, I think it does leave a little bit to be desired. Again, you can modify it to shoot how you want to, but that sort of thing doesn't really appeal to me when, again, I'm spending $1,000 plus on an upper receiver. I'd like it to kind of just run from the factory very, very well, or at least shoot very, very well. And maybe I'm being a little bit too nitpicky on it, but I do a lot of shooting with a lot of cheap guns, and when this shoots worse, feeling worse, you know, a little bit more recoil, a little bit more snappy, and again, I know it's still 5.56, but when it shoots a little bit more snappier than some of my really, really cheap guns, I get a little bit disappointed. So overall, it is still an excellent upper receiver, and if you're looking again for the pinnacle of performance, reliability, longevity, this is going to be pretty close to the top of that stack. You know, maybe you might say CAC or LMT or somebody else is above them, or Daniel Defense or somebody else is above them. I think this is still going to be in the mix with all of the big guys. So overall, excellent upper receiver, does a very, very good job at what it's intended to do. Not the softest shooting upper receiver, depending on who you are, that may or may not be a big deal. Overall though, that is about it for me, guys. Don't forget to check out gun.deals. Once again, thank them for having me on the video. And that's about it for me, guys. See you guys in the next one. Peace off.